Have you ever done something so risky that you can't believe you made it out alive? Well, if you grew up in the 1970s, there's a good chance you did. Back in the day, toy companies didn't really care much about safety. If it was fast on wheels and looked awesome, it made it to the store, even if it could send you right to the hospital. I know you're thinking, what about helmets? Well, it was completely up to you to wear it. Seatbelts? Let it go. Parents? They just said to shake it off. From mini bikes that burst into flames to skates that launched kids into the air like rockets. Today we're counting down the wildest, totally legal riding toys from the 70s. Well, they weren't illegal then. Get ready, hang tight, and hope the brakes hold up. This is going to be one crazy adventure. Have you ever wanted to experience the thrill of Evel Knievel without any effort? The Rally Chopper had your back. This bike had a banana seat, high handlebars, and a smaller front wheel that made every ride feel a stunt show. But here's the thing, if you slam on the brakes too hard, you'll go flying over the handlebars quicker than you can say, "Whoa, dude." It was a crazy catapult on two wheels. Parents believed they were getting their kids the coolest bike ever, but the kids were bumping their heads all over the place, making sidewalks look like accident scenes. After a bunch of lawsuits and trips to the emergency room, they decided to review its design, but the harm was already done. After some time, parents got smarter. Helmets became popular, and the Chopper? It went down in toy history as one of the most dangerous bikes ever made. Next, we have the Sky Cycle, Mattel's hot seat. This one was meant to give kids the experience of being astronauts. Instead, it made them feel like they were just being used for testing. The Mattel hot seat resembled a small rocket on wheels. You jumped on it, yanked the cord, and zoomed off like a rocket. But here's the thing, it had no brakes or seatbelt. There was really no way to stop other than crashing into something. It was okay at low speeds, but as soon as a kid got a bit too hyped and pulled that ripcord a little too hard, it was all over. They were heading right for the ground. Parents didn't have a clue at first, but they got worried as kids got injuries too often, hinting that it wasn't a fun ride toy. Stores took it off the shelves once the injury reports started coming in. In retrospect, giving kids a rocket-powered death trap doesn't look like such a great idea after all. Who would have thought? If the big wheel had a reckless, troublemaking older brother, it was the Green Machine. At first glance, this one looked relatively innocent. A trike that rides low and is controlled by a joystick? That sounds awesome, right? Well, not quite. But the Green Machine wasn't just a big wheel copy. It was a wild, flipping, arm-breaking mess on wheels. The joystick controls were super sensitive, which was the issue. Remember that time you took a sharp turn going really fast? Vroom! You were flipping right onto the sidewalk. Kids were always getting hurt to the point of even passing out sometimes. Injuries just kept stacking up. Head injuries, fractured arms, faceplants that could bring a grown man to tears. Parents were really upset as their children were frequently getting injuries. Eventually, some places just banned it completely. The Green Machine, while built for fun, turned out to be a real speed demon that stunned everyone. Moving forward, we have the Sit and Spin scooter. It was infamous for making kids dizzy with its spinning. At first, it looked like no big deal, until the kids started spinning way too fast and totally lost control. It had no brakes, which made stopping nearly impossible. As a result, children fell off it and suffered from various injuries. It looked like an innocent riding toy at first, but eventually it was more harmful than you think. One moment, you're enjoying yourself. Next, you're heading straight into a tree or the unforgiving ground. Without brakes, once you started moving, there was no stopping. It turned the whole experience of spinning into a total nightmare. Countless kids suffered head injuries and broken arms after wild spins went wrong. In the end, the company kind of disappeared, and we never saw the Sit and Spin scooter again. Next, we have a trike named the Cheetah. Yeah, That should have raised some red flags. It was a low-riding plastic trike with no safety features and plenty of poor ideas. Still, it was a speed demon built to send kids flying into trees, curbs, and everything else in their path. Of course, the kids really enjoyed it, but parents, not so much. Especially when they saw their kids run into literally everything. While admittedly being rapid, it was erratic and almost uncontrollable. Once the kids started rolling downhill, there was no way to stop them. As you can imagine, the crashes were really harsh. Children were left with all kinds of bruises and broken noses. The cheetah wasn't just a risk, it was a certain disaster. After hearing too many scare stories, it was quietly taken off the market. The kids, however, were left with their injuries for a long time as a painful reminder. Now, let's shift gears and talk about Power Wheel's Chevy van. It was meant to give kids the feeling of hitting the open road. Instead, it almost burned them. Yeah, you heard that right. Turns out, the battery had a real problem with overheating, and sometimes it would catch fire while kids were still in there. Parents went from cheering their kids behind the wheel to completely freaking out. Some kids got burned while others got zapped. It was meant to be the ultimate kids' ride of the 70s. Instead, it turned into a serious fire hazard. Power Wheels had to pull it back before things got out of hand. If yours didn't end up in flames, count your blessings. And if it did, well, let us just say you had the full Smokey and the Bandit experience, without the stunt double. Up next is a toy that really took things to the extreme. If you grew up in the 1970s, you most likely had a pair of these death traps. They were not like current rollerblades. Oh no, these were metal strap-on skates that fastened to your sneakers. Sounds fun, right? Except there were no brakes. The only way to stop was to slam into something. Children ate pavement on a daily basis. They were constantly getting bruises, cracked teeth, and skinned knees. If you were unfortunate enough to strike a rock or a crack in the sidewalk, you would become airborne. These were eventually replaced by newer skates that included better safety features. As for the children that wore the original ones, they understand pain like no other. Let's roll on to the next item on our list, the crazy car. Take a plastic seat, throw on some wheels, and let the kids go wild with spinning. What could possibly go wrong? Well, everything. The crazy car seemed pretty harmless at first. It was a fun little ride where the kids swayed side to side to keep it going. But once they figured out how to spin it around really fast, it became a total demolition derby on the driveway. The problem? Without a seatbelt or brakes, it was a menacing ride. Kids were flipping off all the time, often ending up hitting other kids or even their own parents. It was meant to give you a good time until you watched your friend crash face first into the pavement. This thing was made for trips to the emergency. Honestly, if you had one of these and came out just fine, you totally deserve a medal. Next on our adventure through dangerous toys is a ride-on toy shaped like a rocket. Sounds like the ultimate 70s dream, right? Until you realize this thing had zero safety features, and kids were getting launched for real. Kids were sitting on a small wheeled platform, gripping the handles and pushing off with all their might. But due to bad engineering, this thing had no balance or control. And to make it worse, it had a really annoying tendency to flip forward. One minute, you were cruising down the sidewalk. Next, you were up in the air, wondering how you managed to get yourself in that spot. Some kids ended up doing just fine, but the majority were not so lucky. We're talking broken noses and fractured skulls. Not to mention some seriously nasty road rash. Parents had no idea how risky this thing was until it was already too late. The medical reports kept coming in, and before long, stores had to take it off the shelves. By the time it was officially out of sight, a lot of kids had already gone through some tough experiences they'd always remember. Moving on, kids in the 70s didn't need motorcycles. They had the Fireball mini bike. It had a gas engine, drove madly fast, and was unstable enough to ensure some wipeouts. So what's the problem? It had awful brakes and caught fire, way too often. Some kids were just cruising around when they suddenly caught a whiff of smoke. Some people noticed flames bursting from the engine while they were still on it. If you didn't jump off quick enough, you'd be dealing with burns along with those bruises. The crashes were quite harsh. The fireball was just too quick for kids to handle, leading to broken bones and damaged bikes. After a point, parents started asking for their money back. After a bunch of injuries and safety issues, they pulled the fireball from the shelves. But what about the kids who took to ride on it? They had the scariest motorcycle ride of their lives. Moving on to another wild ride, we have the Wheelie King bicycle. This one was built for wheelies, but it seems to have skipped the safety features. The Wheelie King was made for kids who wanted to show off their skills and ride on one wheel, just like a stuntman. So what was the issue? As soon as you leaned back a bit too much, it flipped over right away, and you found yourself landing on your back. You'd expect a toy designed for wheelies to have some sort of balance control, right? No way. It was either everything or nothing at all. Kids who didn't quite get the balance right ended up with scraped elbows and bumped heads. Things got so out of hand that some parents decided to stop their kids from riding them altogether. But that didn't hold back the more adventurous folks from giving it a shot. One thing not a lot of us folks know about this bike, there were these cool tricks printed right on the box, urging kids to try some risky stunts. Exactly. The injuries were part of the marketing strategy. After a bunch of kids made trips to the hospital with broken bones and teeth, the manufacturers decided to pull the Wheelie King from the market. Next up is go-kart, which was meant to be safe in addition to being quick and fun. There was nothing safe about this one. The pedal-powered go-kart from hell had no brakes. Once you got going, you either wrecked it or jumped out, hoping for a miracle. Kids would start pedaling, thinking they were in for the best time ever, until they figured out they had no control. Mountains were a death penalty. Twists and turns, immediate loss. But was it enough to make the kids stop? Of course not. When some children tried to go slowly, they burned their skin and damaged their shoes. Some kids freaked out and turned too quickly, sending them flying out of the cart. Oh, it's just a go-kart. What could go possibly wrong? The parents figured. They finally got their answer after dealing with broken arms, teeth, and regular trips to the emergency room. It was set up to fail from the start. Ultimately, safety inspectors put a nationwide ban on the go-kart from hell. Now let's dive into the disaster that is the lawn dart scooter, which was just what it sounds like. A scooter with a big metal-tipped dart on the front. Can you believe someone actually thought that was a good idea? You were supposed to throw the dart forward and nail the landing. Kids went wild and ended up hurting themselves or anything that came in their way. What if the dart lands on the ground the wrong way? The scooter flipped over, sending kids crashing face first onto the pavement. Some kids got hurt in the leg, while others ended up with serious cuts on their arms. The lawn dart scooter was actually promoted as a fun new way to enjoy the outdoors. Yeah, nothing screams fun like an unexpected impalement. After a bunch of terrible injuries, it was taken off the market. As for kids who had already bought one, they figured out pretty fast that this wasn't just a plaything. It was a rolling machine of destruction. On to our next contender, ride-on cars, which seemed fun, but these weren't safe. It was like driving a car with no steering. The Spin-Out was a battery-powered mini-car that did exactly what the name said. It spun out constantly. If a kid would turn the wheel just a little too much, suddenly they were doing an uncontrollable 360-degree spin. If they were lucky, they'd just spin in place. If not, they'd crash into a tree, a fence, worst case, a moving car. And then there was the battery problem. Some kids noticed smoke coming from underneath their cars. There were others who were not so lucky and were still inside when the battery exploded. Parents bought this, thinking it was just another fun ride-on car. Instead, they ended up watching their kids spin into walls or into danger. After enough injuries and fires, the Spin-Out was recalled. For the kids who rode it, it was part amusement park ride, part total nightmare. Last on the list, we have a small motorcycle for kids. That sounds great until it suddenly catches fire. The electric mini bike was meant to be a fun, battery-powered alternative to gas mini bikes, but they had one major problem. The battery kept overheating all the time. Some kids noticed smoke while they were riding. Some had their entire bike catch fire while they were riding. If they didn't get off quick enough, they ended up with burns on their legs and arms. The bike was way too fast for kids to handle, causing crashes, wipeouts, and some really bad injuries. Many believe the issue was simply bad wiring. No way. The whole design was a disaster. In the end, the electric mini bike got banned, but not before it gave a real scare to the kids who took it for a spin. Dude, the 1970s were rather different. Parents just dumped us outside, told us to be home by dark, and hoped for the best. Just pure, careless enjoyment. No warning labels or safety recalls. Looking back, several of these rides were straightforward killing machines. It's a miracle that we came out whole. Still, if you possessed one of these, you received your stripes. What do you remember from your childhood? Have you ever taken a ride on one of these? Drop a comment and let us know. And hey, if you got through the 70s without a scratch, nice job. You rode some of the most perilous riding toys ever produced. You should be proud. If you don't want to miss the next throwback, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. See you later, thrill seekers.